Hello and welcome back to the HG Rugby Podcast. My name is Hugh, and this week we'll be looking back on the huge match between England and the All Blacks at Twickenham before taking a look over to Murrayfield, where Scotland and Fiji played out a thrilling game. And we'll also be getting to know my wonderful guests this morning. So, you may know him as one of the biggest TikTokers in the rugby content creator space. I know him as Andrew Nolan, but you probably know him as Rugby Nause. Good morning, Nause.
Nice to see you, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, pleasure to have you. I've been having people ever since I've been doing this saying, "Oh, you should get Rugby Nose on. You should get Rugby Nose on." So it's a big thrill. I hope lots of the listeners are happy to have you as well. And yeah, just can't wait to chat about the weekend's action with you.
Yeah, let's see if people can stick my voice for longer than 4 minutes, or whatever the usual format is.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So as always with the show, we just jump straight in, getting into the action. England versus the All Blacks at the Allianz Arena. Uh, what were your expectations going into this game?
I thought it would be close. I thought England might be a little undercooked, and I thought the All Blacks would have the edge just off of playing so much rugby over the summer and kind of the cohesion that they've been able to build since those two teams played each other in July. Um, yeah, that's what I thought. And to be fair, it wasn't far off that.
Yeah, it was pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, it was like there were a lot of errors in the game. Like I was just looking at the stats today. I couldn't believe the number of handling errors from both teams. But I think the pace of it and the intensity of it and the way both teams went about it, even though the execution wasn't perfect when they had the ball, like I think a lot of it was just they put each other under so much pressure. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, I mean, especially like the first 10 minutes was just frenetic. Like you were watching it, you were thinking like they can't play like this for 80
I
minutes. Like
was thinking
the
like
game has to slow down.
the ball in playtime here is through the roof. Obviously, we
Yeah.
know that's what World Rugby are going for. And I was like, has the ball gone dead yet after 10 minutes?
Yeah, it was just so fast paced. And I thought at the time, I was like, well, this is really going to favor the All Blacks.
Hmm.
Um, that's what they want. They want the structures to start falling apart. If you give them space, if you give individual players in their team space, stuff will happen. Um, but I thought England did really well to raise the energy levels again towards the end of the first half. And, you know, they put so much into that defense. And there were moments
Yeah.
where that defense, like it lifted the whole ground, all the fans, all the players. But
Yeah. Like the Cunningham South hit.
yeah, like that was, it felt like a huge moment for it. And it's hard to know whether like chasing those is bad for you as a team in the long run
Hmm.
because everyone's getting really hyped up and g'd up, but like nothing's actually happened on the scoreboard. You haven't moved anything, but it is a great
Yeah.
moment for everyone. um yeah, I mean, I just feel like England, they put so much into that defense that sometimes then
178 tackles they made.
yeah, when they get the ball it just looks like mentally and physically they're tired you know
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to come on to this. So I felt like during this game, we witnessed the England game plan reach its ceiling. And I feel like we've kind of seen that a little bit now. So England, you talk about the energy they put into their defense. If you talk about what they did in attack and where their points came from,
Yeah.
five penalty kicks and an intercept. You talk about where the energy they had for those, defensive moments, those defensive wins. And TNT put out the clip of the Cunningham South thing and was like, "Oh, the roof has come off the place with that
Yeah.
hit." And I was like, "Imagine if they scored a try." You know, like uh, I just I feel that England are like in the World Cup, they had this game plan, this whether you want to call it reductive or whether you want to call it smart
Hmm.
game plan, where it was all about winning, and it was all about getting into tight games and not taking any risk, playing the percentages in playing percentage rugby, and just eking out small wins.
Yeah.
We're now a year on from that, and there was quite a lot of effort during the Six Nations, whether it be from the English players or the English media, to convince everybody that no, we're an exciting team now.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just not what's happened. So they had the stat that I looked up earlier. I'll share the stats actually, and so we can have a bit of a look at it together. The stat was 69 rucks, which isn't very many
Hmm.
in the game for England. And only 20%, 28% of them were less than 3 seconds, which works out to 19 rucks in the
Yeah.
whole game, less than 3 seconds. So they're still playing a very, very slow amount of rugby. They still
Yeah.
kick off nine a lot. They still had less than 100 carries. I think it was 85 carries in the whole game. And when you talk about, you often hear coaches at home games say, oh, we need to be the aggressor because we're the home team. I
Mhm.
didn't feel like England were the aggressors in this game.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Like, I think as an Ireland fan, the period we've gone through where the World Cup aside, we've managed to start getting much better results against the All Blacks. One of the reasons is I think there was a mentality change after Chicago where they realized like you have to score tries. Like you can't beat them if you don't score tries. So there's
Hmm.
no point going out there and trying to play a really tight game because even if New Zealand are at like 60, 70%, they'll still score tries. You know, yesterday they were far from brilliant. They still scored three and they could have had probably another three if a few more balls had gone to hand. And like the way England are playing, I don't think they give themselves the opportunity to create enough. You know, like you
Yeah.
say, lots of kicking off nine, lots of times where it feels like they could have a go, they could try and set something up, but you don't see any of that deception that you see, for instance, when Ireland play, or they don't use their big men to try and build momentum the way France play. You know, there doesn't seem to be like a real identity there beyond doing crossfield kicks and trying to win penalties. You know?
Yeah, well, the stat on the carrying is that Ben Earl got 17 carries. The
Yeah.
next top English forward got five. That's
Wow.
Murray Itoje. So you talk about it reminds me a bit of Gloucester when the plan is uh, Zach Mercer.
Yeah. Yeah.
If Zach Mercer's there, he's getting the ball, and it's nothing else. It's kind of like that with England now, where just Mark Ben Earl. He's the only one who's really going to carry it unless there's some
Mm,
kind of break up in play and someone else gets it. It's kind of not enough really at the moment. If you look at the All Blacks carries, and they've got I think like half a dozen players over 10 carries.
yeah. Yeah. And it's not that England don't have the ball carriers. Like they're there. Cunningham South's a great ball carrier. George Martin
Yeah,
can carry. Like they've got players who can do it. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess it's sort of a deliberate attempt to play less rugby and to back the defense. And yeah,
yeah.
it doesn't seem to serve them as well as it could. Now, the fact that Faye Webosa was next, he is a brilliant carrier as well, by the way. But the
Mm.
fact that he's the next guy on the list is pretty mad.
Yeah, and Marcus Smith being the fly half getting eight. Marcus Smith does normally carry a lot, to be fair,
Yeah.
for Quins and things. But yeah, like you said, it just feels a bit. England was supposed to have progressed from here.
Mm,
They're supposed to be a step further on by now. And there was so much press, like I said, during the Six Nations about how England, oh no, we're an attacking team now. And
yeah.
we're just not seeing it. So I looked up England's results. So this is the third game they played against New Zealand in a row, which to be fair, that's three hard games in a row,
Yeah.
two of them in New Zealand. But they've scored at home, they've scored 22 points. Away from home, they scored 15 and 17. And then
Hmm.
if you look a bit further back, they had that mad game against France. But even when they beat Ireland, they only scored 23 points.
Yeah.
Against Scotland, 21. Against Wales, 16. That's it's just it's a trend now of not scoring very many tries. And do you think, as someone who watches the Premiership a lot, do you think that there's anything to be said for how different Steve Borthwick's game plan is to how most Premiership teams play?
Yeah. I also think as entertaining as the Premiership is, like it's a long way off test level most of the time.
Yeah.
Like unless it's two of the top teams playing each other and they've got everyone, they've both gone full bore selection wise.
Mhm.
And you know, you always hear players talking about it, like the jump from that club rugby to test rugby is so huge. And I just wonder if anyone could manage playing the type of rugby that you regularly see in the Premiership at test level. Like, you know, but and do you know what? I get conflicted about this because I Eddie Jones used to always get quoted as talking about how like a national team needs to somehow represent the national character
Mhm.
of that country. And I was listening to Michael Cheika on Joe yesterday. I don't know if you've seen the interview where he's talking about his childhood and his Lebanese heritage and growing up as an Australian Lebanese person.
Oh wow.
And he was talking about his perspective on the kind of how important national character is in the way that a team plays and how when he goes in and manages a team like Argentina, what he wants to do is learn everything he can about the players and the people so he can start to like put his messages in context so that those people will understand them. And the one thing about the Borthwick game plan that I think really resonates is like it's English. Like when you think of English rugby, you think of power, you think of trying to put a squeeze on, you think of trying to get in the other team's head, you think of like a bunch of big tough bastards trying to make it really hard for you for 80 minutes. You don't necessarily think about flair and attack and all that kind of stuff. You think about
That's
individuals,
true. Yeah.
like they've always had individuals, but they've never been like an attacking systems team. And so I do think there probably is a balance. And like I feel like the game against Ireland in the Six Nations, we saw that balance a little bit, right? Like they did manage to attack a bit better in that game. They did score a couple of tries and they beat one of the best teams in the world. And the question I have about it is like, can you ever defend as hard as they do and put as much into it and then still have enough left in the tank to go and play like a consistent attacking game plan? Or is there just a limit to what players can do? And are England always to some extent going to be feeding off scraps because they put so much into that defense?
Yeah, it was fascinating watching the All Blacks strategy, especially in the first half of chipping over the top and going
Yes.
for those double kicks. Boda Barrett did a
Yes.
really lovely chip, regather, kick again,
It
and
was
that
ridiculous, wasn't
caused
it?
all sorts of problems for England. I love that. I love doubling up on strategies like that. Um, it, it's your point about putting effort into attack versus defense. Eddie Jones's Japan are kind of the opposite of that at the moment,
Yes.
where
Yes.
it's all about attack. And by the time they've like given the ball away and they have to go into a defensive mode, they've got no energy left to go for the defense, which is why they concede so many points. To be
Mm-hmm.
fair, and to your point, I talked about how many points England are scoring. They're not conceding very many.
No.
Very, very rarely concede more than 30. And even in this game, they've conceded 24 to the All Blacks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you would say it's an interesting way of dividing it up because the you would say that All Blacks scored three tries, England scored one, that was an intercept, and the rest were penalties, therefore the correct team won. But then you look at the tries that New Zealand scored. I'll see if I can find them just to put them up on the screen for people to look at. The the two Mark tele'a tries are unreal finishes, very
Yes.
low percentage finishes. And then you've got like the Will Jordan one's great. And then Damien McKenzie makes an unbelievable touchline conversion, which will be a low percentage kick.
Yeah.
So if you say New Zealand scored the more tries, therefore they're the correct winners, yes. But also, how much were those tries just down to individual, someone did something amazing? Mark Telea's had a lot of stick, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Uh, he showed himself to be the slippery eel that we know he is with these two finishes.
Yeah. But if you're England defense coach and you're watching this back, you're not going to be happy. You
George
know?
Ford doesn't do a good job, to be fair.
No. I mean, it's not really his job, but if when tele'a gets the ball, he should never be scoring there
Yeah,
in Test
absolutely not.
rugby. Never. And like you say, you have to give it to him, but it's what the All Blacks always seem to be able to do. Like they have people who can just pull rabbits out of a hat, and they've got lots of them.
Yeah, and George Ford's defense, I'm sorry to pick on him. I know you said it's not really his job, but George Ford's defense has been a talking point for his entire career.
Yeah.
And it's only now saying it out loud, like George Ford stood on the wing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look at the top test teams, if you look at South Africa or even like lower down teams like Fiji, the days of tens hiding on the I'm using the word hiding, but
Yeah.
they're hiding on the wing in defense are kind of gone. Like
Yeah.
if you look at the tackle stats for a Sasha Feinberg and Gomazulu or like a Sam Costello for Wales or something like that,
Yeah.
they stand in the 12 channel and they tackle the big men who run at them.
Well, look at the guy. The guy who's next in line is Finn Smith, and he's routinely near the top of the tackle count in club
Mm.
tournaments. Like he makes so many tackles for Northampton. You're right. It's not something that people really do anymore.
Yeah. So that's maybe something to think about. I know that George Ford has just been handed one of those special elite contracts, which is uh, secured his England future at least for another year, shall we say.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the All Blacks now. So th there's been I know you follow the Rugby Championship quite closely. There's been a
Mm-hmm.
lot of chat about the All Blacks under Razor and the fundamental issues under him. Have has this game shown any improvement from the last time you saw them play,
I
excluding the
think,
Japan game?
yeah, I think definitely. And I think also like I was surprised on the TNT coverage yesterday at some of the things that were being said about their performance in the rugby championship. Because, like, I know they lost a game to Argentina that no one expected them to lose, and they lost twice to South Africa, but they pushed South Africa really hard in both of
Yeah,
those
I do
games.
think South Africa went into their shells a bit for those games, though. I don't think they were South Africa's best performances.
Possibly, but I still think that like New Zealand's downfall is being over-egged everywhere.
Mm.
There's no doubt they're not what they used to be, right? But the fact is, they that first game against South Africa, they should have won that game. Like they kind of threw that game away, the All Blacks.
Yeah,
You credit to the South African subs and like to the game plan and all that stuff. Obviously, it doesn't. You can't just take that away from them. But still, New Zealand were in a position where afterwards they would have been sitting in the changing rooms thinking, "How did we let that slip? Like we had it." Um, and yeah, I definitely think there's a sign of improvement. Number one, I think he's starting to figure out selection a bit better. Um, he tried Mackenzie at 10 for 7 games or 8 games, and they just couldn't really make it work. It felt like he was figuring out who was going to play at 9. I think Ratama, the intercept yesterday, notwithstanding, has had a really good rugby championship for a rookie. And
Hmm.
now they're looking into the future and they've got him and Roygaard and they've got 2 great options there. I think the emergence of Tupavai in the second row has been massive for them. Like
Yeah.
he's a guy that they weren't 100% sure what to do with before. And after the World
Patrick
Cup,
Tuipulotu had a great
oh,
impact when he came
how
on as
good
well.
was he yesterday? Like
Yeah.
they've gone from the end of the World Cup, oh, we've got no locks, to they've got plenty.
Well, it's
Like,
got this. The whole thing was like the Blues played all of Super Rugby with this phenomenal pack that just destroyed everybody,
yeah.
and then it got to Test Rugby, and Razor didn't pick any of them, and now he's picked the Blues cap. He's the Blues captain.
He is,
Yeah,
yeah.
he is. And it's like, oh, a really physical lock. Well, it turns out we did have one. Like, yeah, everyone said you had one.
Yeah. He has been, it felt like maybe he's been a bit dogmatic selection wise.
It
Like,
does. Yeah.
you don't know what's going on inside the camp, so it's hard to read what it is. But he obviously, I don't know in the beginning if it was just that he wanted to go with players that he felt he knew better.
I think
So
so.
maybe he thought the messages will get through, and also I feel like I can rely on these guys. But like, the fact that Tuipulotu wasn't straight in there, the fact that Caleb Clark wasn't straight in there, like these are players who are the foreign players in the top club tournament that you've got to choose from,
Hmm.
and for whatever reason you're sticking with other guys. But the improvement I think is there in the sense that you can see players coming into themselves. You can see they're starting to figure out some patterns that are going to work for them. But I don't know if the overall identity of the team is really coming through yet. Like the criticism that was always levied of them under Foster was, they don't really have a game plan. They're kind of just relying on their individuals to pull
Yeah.
moments for them. And I mean, that's what happened yesterday.
Hmm.
Like whatever game plan there was fell apart pretty quickly, and they were
Well,
just running it from everywhere.
going back to that Mark Telea's second try, he'd been subbed.
Yeah,
He was
he'd
only
come back
back on the
on.
pitch because I think Geordie Barrett went off for an HIA. That's the only reason
Yes.
he went back onto the pitch. So that again, that's another like it's it's unlucky in a sense from England's point of view that the only
Yeah.
guy in the 46 people involved in that game who could have scored that try had been subbed and by some fluke came back onto the pitch and scored that try. But I want to show you a stat that I think sums up for me the thing that is still New Zealand's biggest problem, or at least the thing that makes them frustrating to watch at times, and it's the possession map. So,
Okay.
in my opinion, maps are the best stats, but you can see the huge hump in the middle of the pitch, 38% between their own 22 and the halfway line. And
Yeah.
this is something that it reminded me a lot of watching the first game against Argentina that they lost,
Yeah.
just massively overplaying in totally the wrong
Yeah.
areas. And they didn't kick off 9 barely at all. Bodie put in 16 kicks, Ratimer put in 5. And then when Roygaard came on, he only put in 2. So they didn't
Mm.
kick off 9 at all. And there were times when they were playing in this zone where I was thinking, kick the ball, someone kick the
Yeah.
ball. And then
Oh.
and then they kicked it dead. And I was like, no, not like that. But um, the passes throughout the Rugby Championship, they were kind of trending at nearly 2 passes per ruck. So they had
Hmm.
100 and something rucks in this game, 211 passes, which is mad. So
Mm.
they're trying to spin it wide. They're trying to get the ball in the hands of people, and it has to be said that their transition still looks like the best form of them attacking. Uh,
Yes.
the Now they didn't actually score any tries off it, and unfortunately they ended up like there was the Sititi break where he passed it to one of the locks. I can't remember which one.
Where he
Um,
dropped it.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
Vi. Yeah, I think
Vi.
it
It was
was Vi.
Vi. Yeah.
Um, and it's one of those stats that on the last pod I did with Brendan Shields, he said like, oh, line breaks for low number players normally end up in territory losses. And now that I know that, I'm seeing it everywhere, and I'm like, no, that's not who you want doing it. So the the transition still seems like their best attack. Whenever
For
they got
sure.
a transition, they were running through England. They know England's defense is all about line speed. So when they get a transition and they're not set, they look
Hmm.
so open. But I mentioned a player there, Wallace Sititi. A lot of
Yeah.
people were surprised he got a call up after Super Rugby.
Yeah.
He's got a few people up, hasn't he?
Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody wanted Hoskins to tutu, right?
Yeah,
And everyone was
yeah,
like, "Why are you
exactly.
bringing this guy?" But he's just been ridiculous, and he is going from strength to strength as well. Like you can see him growing into himself, taking on more of a role. He's doing more every game. It feels like. I mean, he just looks like a superstar.
Yeah, three line breaks, 16 carries. Like he's just
The
at the top of everything. If you like take the stats individually,
Yeah.
Wallace Sititi's like at the top or top three and like every stat.
The pace of the man as well. Like
Oh my
when he
God, yeah.
pumps the legs and when he really gets going, like it's such a threat. Um, I, I mean, it's without a doubt the find of the rugby championship for them, right? Like definitely the best thing that came
No,
out of the
definitely.
tournament was him and his performances. But it's just scary. It's just one of those as an opposition fan that you look at and you're like, oh, that guy for the next 10 years of my life, that guy's going to be ruining my Saturdays a couple of
This is
times a year.
this is a question that I've spoken about with a few people. I'm interested to get your view. What's the balance between him and Ardie Savea? Because I'm looking at the stats now, and Ardie isn't particularly high on many, if any, stats. And this is a guy who was World Rugby Player of the Year less than 12 months ago.
Yeah.
Is Wow, three tackles, Ardie Savea. That's like nothing for him. How many
Yeah.
carries did he get? Just checking now. Ardie Savea got 12 carries. That's still
Yeah.
a fair amount. But do, do they work together? Is this a Lampard Scholes?
Oh, I wonder. I mean, there's a debate about it, right? Like Razor had an interesting comment about it where he was asked about it and he said, it doesn't really matter what number these guys wear on their backs.
Hmm.
It only really matters for the scrum. Is that for the rest of it, we're just playing footy, which is like, on the one hand, you could read it as being just dismissive,
Yeah.
just being like, forget about it. And then on the
Ah,
other
vibes.
hand,
Don't worry about
yeah,
it.
on the other hand, it's like, they're ridiculously good players. Like I'm sure they can figure out a balance, but it does feel like Kane being in there at the moment, number one, just because he's going to leave, right? It's like he's in and there's no future in it. And
Hmm.
it does feel as though Sititi being a natural eight, if you shifted him to eight and you shifted Ardie back to seven, which is with his natural position, then there's space to bring in someone really big at six to do a lot of grunt work. And
Yeah.
then that should free up Sititi and Ardie to carry and to tackle and to do all the stuff that we know that they're really good at. Because you're right, like Ardie was World Player of the Year. And it used to be that when there was a big New Zealand game, he was just everywhere and you saw him constantly. Um, I wonder. I'd love to know how. I'd love to know how he feels about it. Because obviously he'd never be drawn into answering a question like that. But it must be
Yeah.
strange going from being like the main guy to suddenly everyone's talking about Sititi and watching his carries and
Yeah.
yeah.
Because to be that good, you have to have a certain mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. It would be fascinating to go, how do you feel about this kid who's just rocked up and is
Yeah,
making
yeah.
him look like a mug? He's not making him look like a mug, but just if you put the question to him like
Yeah,
that, he probably wouldn't answer it if you asked it like that, to be honest. But
yeah. What I
yeah,
would want to ask him if there was a serious way to ask him, I want to say like, how has your role in the team changed? Like, actually take me through on like a granular basis how you
mm,
think your role has changed because you've gone from being this kind of swashbuckler to appearing to be more quiet in games, but like perhaps you're doing work that we don't see. Like in your mind, what is it? Because like it does seem stark, but I always think like he's Ardie Savea. He's not going to be. There's no way he's hiding in games. You know.
yeah, and maybe he is having a dip in form. Maybe we don't
Maybe,
no
yeah.
notice it because Ardie Savea's dip in form is still
Yeah,
really,
still
really
so
high.
good.
Um, God, Wallace Sititi even took as many lineouts as him. It's crazy. But maybe like in a year's time, we'll all be looking back on this going, do you remember when we thought Ardie Savea was washed? That was funny,
Yeah.
wasn't it? So yeah, so what's next for these two teams then? So I think who are England playing next? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Australia.
Australia. Oh, okay. Well, they're probably going to win that. England have got a hoodoo
Yeah,
over Australia. And then All Blacks going to play Ireland. We'll talk about that in a little bit more in a
sure.
second. But just before we move on to the next topic, I just want to say to people, if you're enjoying what you're seeing so far, please do consider giving the channel a subscribe and giving the video a like. Share a link with a friend. If you're listening on the audio version, if you could give us a 5-star review, it really, really helps out. And you can leave a comment when you do that, and we'll get in and we'll interact and we'll respond to those. So really appreciate the support. Okay, Andy, before we talk about the next game, which was Scotland Fiji, I want to talk a bit more about you. So, one of the
Sure.
questions that I had planned for you when you were coming on was, who do you support? But you come on wearing Ireland's top, which helps that. Who's your club
Yes.
allegiance with?
Leinster.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm a Dubliner, so
How are you feeling about how they're going on this season? They seem to be taking it, they're going a lot harder in the URC than when used to.
yeah, yeah. I think the ideal scenario for them is that they build a big lead early on, or at least that there's a gap that they can exploit later in the season when, if they are going to go for the Champions Cup again, then maybe they can rest some players in URC games. But what's cost them in previous years is not taking the start of the tournament as seriously. So it feels like they're doing the right thing. But I'm cautiously optimistic. We've been burned too many times before.
Yeah, is it lads, win something this season, please, and not just the Irish Shield.
They have to, man. Like they've brought in huge names. Like Geordie Barrett's still coming. They've brought in
Yeah,
huge names. If they can't win something after that, they're never going to win anything at all.
I'm asking everybody, where does Geordie Barrett play for Leinster? Do
I think he might play on the wing.
you think?
Yeah, but I think they'll try and use him as like a Faye Waboso style wandering winger. Like you got to try and get him in the game as much as you possibly can.
Yeah,
But who are you going to drop? Maybe in the center, but they've got
Ringrose isn't
three.
very durable, so maybe Henshaw out to 13.
That's true. Um, I think the most likely answer to that question is it depends on who's injured.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good point.
yeah, if everyone was fit and they slotted him in on the right wing, because he used to play on the wing all the time for the Hurricanes, he's brilliant under the high ball. I definitely think he could make a big impact. If he went in on the right wing, like that back line, there's no gaps in it. There's zero issue with that back line. But someone will be injured, and so he'll probably step
Yeah,
in.
yeah. I can't wait to see it. A lot of people have been really pissed off by that signing. I'm like, as someone who's like looking in from the outside, because I'm a Scarlets fan, so I'm not invited to this party. I'm like, this is great. This is what we watch sport for. I want to see the biggest stars playing on the biggest stages or the stage that's closest to me. And now I've got that. So,
Yeah.
um, switching from, oh no, before I move on to that, you are England based. You
Yes.
have an English team as well.
Yeah. Yeah. My missus is a big Quins fan, so we're down to Quins a reasonable amount, and they are so much fun to watch. So
Have they been
yeah,
as much fun this season? Because I've read that they've kind of changed their game plan. They're actually starting to care about defense now.
yeah. They've been a little bit steelier, all right. Um, which there are some times where you're watching them and they just forget about defense for a 10-minute period in a game, and you're like, why is this happening? Like you've got really good players. This doesn't have to happen. Um, so a bit more pragmatism, I think, is a good thing. But they've still got, plenty of X factor. Like Isgro has been super exciting to watch. Marcus Smith is always brilliant to watch. And yeah, the mentality runs deep. They still throw the ball around, which is great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming on to your content creation career then. So how did you get into making TikToks about rugby?
I'd been thinking about doing something for a little while. Um, and I got laid off. The company that I was working for went under. Um, and I worked in tech in 2021, 22. Like every startup was folding because there was no more money. So
Yeah.
lost my job. There wasn't a massive prospect of getting anything really quickly. And there was a bit of stink over the place that I'd worked at. So I
Right.
think, yeah, it wasn't ideal. So I was like, look, you're never going to have a better chance to do something for yourself than now. and the Rugby World Cup was coming up, and I was like, this is like, the timing is too perfect to not do something. So I just set myself a challenge because I didn't know if anybody would watch it. I didn't think anybody would. And I was like, during the tournament, I want to make a video about every game. And then when we get to the end of the tournament, we'll see where we are. And it kind of popped off. So, I mean, that was it. I didn't know what to expect. I'd worked in, like, my roles have always been in like advertising marketing. So I've worked in social before. So I had an idea about how I was going to do it, but I didn't really think people would care. So it was quite surprising.
How long have you been doing it now? So since the World Cup?
Well, a little bit more. So since July 23.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's like a lot less time than I thought it was. The way that you seem very fixed on the landscape, considering it's not been that long.
The
We
key
the
is
Pirate
just to make
Rugby just after
so
that.
many videos. That's the
Well,
key.
I wanted to come on to that. I wanted to come on to that. So I'm going to share it now. So this is your TikTok profile. As someone, we both have full-time jobs other than making content.
Yeah.
So as someone who's in that boat as well, the amount of content that you make blows my mind. So it's not like you're making 30-second like reaction videos of stuff. You're doing like running down each league like every single week. And like you've got the graphics, you've got the background, the consistent format, so everyone knows what they're getting every time they watch a Rugby Nause video. How do you how do you make this much content?
Uh, I get up really early and I make videos in the morning before I go to work. Um, I make videos at lunchtime and I make videos in the evening. So if you follow that structure, you could make 3 videos every day. It's a grind. Um, but the truth is, it's a lot of time and effort. It's a lot of research, um, late nights, early mornings. I have the type of personality I have. Like I get addicted to things, and if I'm gonna do something, usually it's like full send. And also, the way I looked at this was like, I knew I wasn't. I knew I was. So eventually, after the World Cup, I got a job, right, and I suddenly had to start balancing working again with doing
Yeah.
this stuff. And my view was, you have to massively make the most of when you have a lot of time to do it. And you, again, like from working in social and stuff, I was like, I want to grow quickly. And the way to grow quickly is just to produce lots and lots. And you've got to try and keep the quality as high as you can. Sometimes you put something up and you're like, oh God, I wish I'd spent a bit more time on that. But
But then sometimes you don't put that much effort into something, and it's your biggest video in ages.
yeah, it's
And
crazy.
you put tons of effort into something, and it does like nothing.
Yeah,
And that's the if anyone's thinking of getting into content creation, that's always my first bit of advice is effort does not equal views,
no.
unfortunately. And so from your point of view, then, what's the payoff for you? Is it a huge view count, or is it feeling that you've made something like, yeah, I'm proud of that, or what, or is it something else?
I think like over a long period of time, if I look back at the channel, there's only a couple of things. Like early on in the days of the channel, I made a lot of videos about Owen Farrell when he had the big red card thing before the World Cup.
Yeah.
And honestly, looking back at it, I'm kind of, yeah, probably shouldn't have made as many as I did. Like I never went after him or anything like that. But overall, I sort of feel like the balance between talking about a trending topic because it's trending and making really quality, making the best quality content I could, the balance was probably a bit wrong there. But for the most part, I look back at the channel and I think I've done my best to put good stuff out there with the hope that it intersects. So there's, when you spend, number one, when you spend a lot of time on the internet, you get a feel for the content cycle and how it works. And then number two, all your reading and all your watching of rugby, you have an idea of the things you want to talk about. And when you can find the intersections between those two things, generally you can make something good and the views will be good, right? So it's like trying to find those points is really the skill. And then obviously writing, concepting, all that kind of stuff. Fortunately, again, yeah, for years at work, I've been doing stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I'm confident about doing that. But the challenge, I think, is always like making something good, but around something that's in the zeitgeist that people actually care about it. So you're not just chasing views, but you're trying to offer an interesting perspective or an alternative view maybe on something that's out there. And then also just the consistency is really important. Like people need to know what they're going to get from you. They need to know when they're going to hear from you, and they need to know that you're going to be there for the stuff that they care about too. So covering leagues and all that kind of stuff. I've experimented with different ways of doing it, obviously, because there's so much rugby. There's only so many
Yeah.
hours in the day. But yeah, I think in my head, it's always like I go back to when I started the channel, and the goal was, if I watched something like this, would I then go and talk to my friends about it before a game if we all met up in the pub? And that's always what I'm trying to hit. And yeah, beyond that, it's just like try and work hard at it. You know, if you're going to do it, try and put your best face on it. And see where it goes.
Yeah, that point about yeah, it feels like I'm trying to come up with an analogy. It's like trying to hit a shooting star with a missile. It's like I'm really proud of this missile, but it's only worth it if it hits that shooting star. So it's
well, that's the thing. That's the game, right? Like if you can't find a way to make whatever your voice is perform, then you're putting stuff into a void ultimately. And it's so frustrating, like you say, when you put a ton of effort into something and it doesn't do very well. It's so annoying because you feel like you know it's good because you've put the time in and you've tested all of the ideas and you know it's decent, and it doesn't perform. Is so frustrating. And you know, that side of it, one thing I would say to anyone who wanted to try and do it is like make sure mentally that you keep a distance from the performance of the thing. It's very hard to do, but just try and always have it in the back of your mind, because if you have a bad week where the views are low on every video and you've put a ton of work into it, you're like, geez, what am I doing? You know?
Yeah, no, you can. I've a couple of times panicked because the thing that like, why is it? I got a spam email, so I don't know if you get these. Yeah, because of a YouTube account, you get the emails from like people claiming to be whatever, saying like, I can help you boost your channel, blah blah blah
Oh,
blah
of
blah. And it's
course.
all like just all this, and I got a really like smart but horrid one yesterday, which was, "Hi Hugh, we've noticed your views are down this week. We can help you.
Ooh.
We can help you solve that." And unfortunately, I knew like my views aren't down, but my
Yeah.
last like main video was down. But anyway, but like that's so smart from the person who
If
wrote
you
that.
had been having a bad week and
Yeah,
you were in your feelings about it, you might not have had that thought,
yeah,
right? Like you see something like that and you're like, oh God, they're right. Like
yeah,
my greatest, it's one of those when I'm feeling low, it's always like that great fear is like, oh, you've fallen off. Like nobody cares anymore.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's like, what have I done wrong? What did I
yeah.
do wrong? I don't know what I did wrong. Yeah.
It's like, it is brutal. Like, especially I feel like it can be kind of isolating too, because it's weird. Because on the one hand, you have this awesome community. Like I have new
Mm.
friends from the channel. I have
Yeah,
people that I talk
absolutely.
to all
That's
the
the best thing
time.
about it.
Oh, it's brilliant. Like these people who every time something happens in the rugby world, your phone's blowing up because everybody wants to talk about it, and that's awesome. And you get all these different perspectives. And you speak to people you'd never speak to otherwise, which is
Mm.
amazing. I've got so excited talking about the good parts. I can't remember what I was gonna bring up. But the other side of it is it's quite isolating because making content is something you do on your own, like,
Yeah.
and it's removed from the world. And you know, like sometimes I have a few people have come up to me at work and been like, you know, oh, my boyfriend watches your channel, or I've seen your videos, and it's so strange when the online and the real life stuff comes together.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's been really good fun. It's funny, like sometimes you feel like, oh, this is amazing, you know, it's growing all the time, it's brilliant, and then other times you're like, well, there's a long way to go, you know.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the one thing that you said about people knowing what they're going to get from you, that's something I've heard other creators talk about as well. That's something that I'm really trying to work hard on, is when someone clicks on something that I've made, they know what they're going to get.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is about the having pride in what you made. Like the biggest video on my YouTube channel is about um, cocaine use in French rugby.
I
And
watched that video, yes.
oh, thank you. So it's like the biggest video on the channel, and but when I made that, I was thinking I just need something quick to get a video out.
Yeah.
And this was a big um news story in France at the time. I was like, okay, I know this is a big news story in France. I haven't seen that much English coverage of it. There's been some. There was an article in the Telegraph, so I put it out there, and then it became the biggest thing. Most annoying thing about it was it had restricted monetization, so it made like a tenth of the money that it should have made. Which, but now I'm like, oh, that's the biggest video on the channel. Like it's about that topic, and I'm like, can someone not watch my
Yeah.
video looking at how brilliant Rugby Club Von is or something, that's only got like 500 views. So
Yeah. Well, once it goes out there, it's out of your control.
yeah,
Like I've seen, there's nothing worse than when you put something out there and the comments start rolling in, and you're like, people have either I've communicated it badly or people have misinterpreted this, and it's the
yeah,
train's left the station now.
yeah,
Like we're
yeah,
stuck with this now. Yeah, it's a horrible feeling. But the other thing that's weird that I wasn't prepared for is like how in the beginning how scary it is when a video actually does well.
yes. Oh my God, yes.
Like it's what you want,
Like I
and then it
didn't mean
starts
to.
happening. Yeah, yeah, it starts happening, and you're like, oh, I flew too close to the sun. This is bad.
Yeah,
Everyone's gonna
yeah,
find out about me, and people are gonna realize I'm a fraud. It's
yeah.
such plays such interesting tricks with your head.
It is. It is. Oh, we could talk about this forever, but
Yeah.
from a technical point of view, so from this asking for a friend, the from a production point of view, what do you think are the most important things? Is it audio, lighting, background? What would you say?
On TikTok, I don't think it matters. On TikTok, I think the most important thing is the first 3 seconds.
Right.
And actually, I mean, probably in reality, the first thing you say, the first 5 words, whatever it is the most important thing. Like number one, can you sum up the concept in the opening line? And number two, can the background do some extra work so that people know exactly what this is? That's
Hmm.
the most important thing, is that you catch people and you stop them flicking, right? So I always look at it that like, and it's so annoying because sometimes you've got a bit like 3 minutes into a video, you're like, God, that's actually a good piece of analysis. Like, I actually think I'm on something here. But if the first few seconds aren't good, it doesn't matter. You will
Yeah.
lose that person. So that's, and I don't worry about sound. Like, as long as you can hear me properly, I don't worry about trying to get the lighting right so I don't look like I'm like the other day I did one and I didn't light my face properly. And I got a couple of messages from people being like, dude, are you okay? Like, you look like you haven't slept. I was like, no, it's just the camera. So lighting's probably important. But for the most part, I think it's consistency in whatever you're doing. And what are you prioritizing? For me, what I prioritize is getting stuff out. When I'm happy with the idea, it goes, right? When I feel like there's something decent there. And I'm not going to waste time trying to bring the production values up to this amazing level when the aim of the game is to grow the channel still.
Hmm.
So it's just about getting stuff out there that you think people will like. And, you know, when it's like playing sport. When there's a bad one, there's always the next one. There's always another game.
Yeah.
There's always another video. So
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
that's a great bit of advice. There's always the next video.
well, exactly.
Okay, so we'll get back to talking about some rugby matches now, but before we do, just want to remind people that if they do want to support the channel, then there is membership available for 99 pence a month, which is the lowest that YouTube lets me set it at. But it does help. At the moment, it costs money to make this stuff. So if you do want to help me break even and you would like to support, then membership is available there. And you do get exclusive content that you can't find anywhere else. There's about a dozen videos on the YouTube channel that's like highlights, clips, and things that I really love making, but don't get many views. That you can find if you get membership that only you will be able to see. So I hope you'll enjoy it, and I really appreciate it if anybody does fancy doing that. Okay, so the other international game yesterday was Scotland versus Fiji, a mad game. I
It was
felt a
crazy,
bit,
wasn't it?
I felt a bit mugged off because I've been hyping Fiji for ages, and then they go and let themselves get 50 points put on them, especially 26 points in the first 20 minutes. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you're making me look a fool here, Fiji. What what happened? What went on there?
I feel in the same boat as you. I had much higher hopes of them. Like I know the big names weren't there, um, but I think they haven't played together with that group against really high quality opposition very much, if at all, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I think the first 20 minutes, I think they fell apart, didn't they? Like the errors were there, the
They very
structures
much got on the
broke.
wrong side of the referee
They
very
got on the
early.
wrong side of the referee. It was like everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And Scotland were ruthless about it. And like the game was over after 20 minutes. It was done.
Yeah. The the frustrating thing was that they absolutely got on the wrong side of the referee. They had the yellow card and they had another yellow card.
Mm.
They couldn't stop conceding penalties. And like you said, that it was like the step up kind of called them. I do feel that styles make fights is what I always say, and I think that stylistically Scotland are a really bad match for Fiji because
Mm,
Scotland are physical enough. It was mostly a Glasgow team, and they're playing unbelievable rugby in the URC at the moment, but they they also have the backs. Like they had the full Glasgow 10, 12, 13, and then you had Ali
mm.
Price who's played with those guys a lot as well, and then you had Darcy Graham and Duhan van der Merwe on the wings who were probably upgrades on Glasgow's wings, and
Yeah.
it was just like a a perfect, almost a perfect storm for Fiji. And when I saw them go 26-0 down, I was pretty gutted.
Oh, me
But
too.
they did have from like in the middle half of this game, they had like their phase play attack was fantastic. Like
Yeah.
if I show you like the stats again, talking about ruck stats, they had 120 rucks, and over half of them were less than 3 seconds. And they still had the skill. You have to remember that the winger, I can't remember his name, I'll look it up in a second, has only just come over from sevens, and he was
Yes.
playing amazing stuff. Their centres, I think, struggled quite a lot in this game. Obviously, they're not Josh Tuisova and Wesen Nathalevu, so it was a step down from their first choices, and I do think that
Mm,
they struggled. But that Muntz Armstrong Ravula combination is still looking amazing. Armstrong Ravula
yep.
getting a try, which is good because I hyped him up before the game as well. We're starting being Fiji first because, like I said, you and I, we had really high hopes for them.
Yeah.
And they're just brain explosion discipline, which we have seen from the Drua in Super Rugby this
Hmm.
season a few times, just completely lose the plot. And then I felt like in the final 20, they just lost all faith in their defense. They were massively over chasing, and
Yeah.
Scotland capitalized. But Darcy Graham, 4 tries, scrum cap wearer, we know they're popular. Where does he rank in terms of wingers in the world at the moment?
God, I mean, it's got to be pretty high. Like, he's a machine. He's absolutely rapid. He can, I mean, there was a bit in the second half where he sidestepped like six people in midfield. Like, he just kept going.
Yeah.
Um, when you rank, I feel like because Scotland still haven't taken that step of beating a South Africa or a New Zealand,
Yeah,
I think that means that people underrate their players sometimes,
I
um,
fully agree.
as individuals. And I think if Scotland went and beat South Africa, is it next weekend? I think it is. Let's say they did that.
Let's say it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's say they go and beat them next weekend and Darcy Graham scores 2 tries. People will suddenly be talking about him like, how is he one of the best wingers in the world? Um, I don't know where you put him. He's certainly super dangerous. If I wanted someone where I thought we've got a really good chance of attacking a lot in this game, and I want someone to get on the end of things, and I think there's going to be broken play, I'd want him in there. He's lightning.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk about it now. I've kind of lost the tab. Okay, got it. The the knock on that was a kick
Yeah.
for me, and I'm a Fiji fan, so I've got a bias on this, but I don't see how this has been given as a kick personally, my interpretation of the rules. So he kind of tries to kick it and then misses it with that foot, but then kicks it with the other foot, but it's already touched the ground. So I don't really get it. I don't really
Is
understand what's happened here.
When I was watching it live, I was like, are they trying to say that it's like flicked his ankle on the way down?
Because it doesn't. I'm going to refresh this
It
page.
didn't look like it did. And to me, that's the only way it could be a kick.
Yeah, so it's in slow mo here for the
It would
people.
have to hit
It
there.
doesn't hit his ankle. It does. I'm going to say, please work for me, but it doesn't hit his ankle. No, it's frozen again now. But I don't agree with the it just grazes his ankle thing. What like and then it kicks it, but is it like it's bounced but it hasn't gone forward so he can still kick it? Is that what the ruling is? I, in a lot of games, this is just called as a knock on and not even looked at.
Yeah,
Because
I think
Craig
so.
Evans, the referee, during the game, he said, "Oh, it's play on," and then he said, "Oh no, I've seen it on the screen now, and now I think it's not a try." And then he came back and said, actually, I want to TMO it. So actually, the thing that the TMO ended up overruling, the TMO said, no, it is a try, and you said it's not. So
I don't know if it's like a phantom. Does the ball move slightly when it goes past his ankle? No.
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I don't see how that's a try.
So for
I just
me,
don't.
in the spirit of the rules, that is a knock on. He's
Yeah.
dropped it.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what I feel. But he also had another moment in this game where he got dummied by a Canaveri.
That was great. You know what though? That's one of those where it's like he didn't really want to make that tackle.
Yeah, business decision.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We're winning this anyway. But
Exactly.
but then he scored 4 tries in the game. So
Yeah, I mean you
can't
can't really argue with that.
yeah. So like you said, when are Scotland going to get this big result? Because I fully agree. I like my one that's an example is Xander Fagerson. I think should be Lions starting tight head prop. I think he's the best. But people go, oh, but he's Scottish, so therefore he must not be very good. So I agree. I think that Scotland's individual players are underrated.
Mhm.
Is it going to take a South Africa or New Zealand for people to believe?
Well, I think probably. Like I know they haven't been helped by the draw at the last two World Cups. But if you look at their performance in World Cups and in the Six Nations, they've got over the England thing, right? Like they love
Very
playing against
much.
England now.
Yeah.
Um, but they seem to come up short against Ireland in the same way every time, even though the games are different. It's like they get out muscled and they lose the contest that way. And against France, I mean, they've had some wins against France, but it seems like they can't get a significant one that actually plays
Yeah.
into the tournament, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And then at World Cups, the Japan, obviously they lost to Ireland and then they managed to lose to Japan. And then, I mean, having Ireland and South Africa in their group in 23 was
But
insane.
if you were going to win the World Cup, you got to beat someone like that
Well,
anyway.
exactly. And it's not just that they lost those games. I think it's like the manner in which they lost both of those games. And they came in very hyped. You know, they obviously were feeling good. And in that Ireland game, I was there. Like they threw everything they had at Ireland in the first 15 minutes. And it just wasn't enough. Like they came back again and again in the opening 15 and they just couldn't do it. And it just feels like they're lacking. I don't know whether it's some belief about beating the big teams.
Hmm.
So it feels like they need to get over the hump. You know, I think the best thing that could happen for them, and I would hate it, but the best thing that could happen for them would be to beat Ireland in the Six Nations, and
Yeah,
suddenly,
definitely.
suddenly, the gloves are off. They can go out there and they'll believe in themselves.
Yeah. The build up for Scotland Ireland games are always quite dull because it's like, who's going to win? Ireland. Yes.
there's a weird thing in Ireland where like people in the media. I've heard Tom
Matt
English.
Williams. Oh,
Well,
Tom
yeah,
English. Yeah, yeah.
Tom English, who is an Irishman
But
called
covers
Tom
Scotland.
English, who
Yeah.
covers Scotland, which I love. It's like the start of a bad joke. Um, but he's brilliant. And he talks about in Ireland, there's this perception that Scotland are like uppity and that they rate themselves
Yeah.
and that they talk Ireland down before games. And it's like, well, obviously they're going to say they think they're going to win. They're not going to sit there and be like, well, no, I think we'll lose again, like always. That's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But there's needle between them. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think the sets of players really like each other.
No, no. I don't think many URC players like the Irish players because
Yes.
you kick our asses up and down the league every other weekend. So,
Yeah. And I mean,
yeah.
they must look at the clubs and some of the resources and be like, oh,
Yeah.
I hate
Okay,
those
then.
guys.
So, talking about Ireland then, All Blacks up next.
Mhm.
Ireland's currently ranked number one team in the world. How can Ireland prove that they are the number one team in the world?
um, to who?
Everybody other than themselves.
Well, I don't think anybody will take. Yeah, I don't think anybody will take it seriously until they win a World Cup. Probably is the answer. I think like people, what the rankings are is a representation of the last 2 years. Like it's supposed to show you how good teams are over a period of time, not how good teams are on their best day or anything like that. It's how consistent can you be, and how good are your high level performances. And from that perspective, I feel like Ireland have earned it, right? Like, but
Yeah,
that doesn't mean that they're the best team on their day in the world. It means that they've been the most consistent team in
but
the world.
that's what matters, isn't it?
Well, not at a World Cup. What matters at a World Cup is that you're the best team in the world for 2 months, you know, and that you perform really well for 2 months. It's because Ireland have been world number one before when they've manifestly not been the best team in the world, right?
Yeah,
Like going into 2019, we were world number one, and there was no way. There was just no way. Um, Now the claim is a lot stronger, and I think the fact that they went and they took a game off South Africa in July, and
yep,
in all honesty, if they weren't sloppy in the first game, they could have had that one too. It shows you that those two are, I think, better than everybody else.
agree.
But I mean, I think if they played 10 games, it might be 5-5, like who knows?
Well, I think exactly to your point. They took a game off South Africa in the summer in South Africa, and I wouldn't back South Africa to beat Ireland in Dublin. I wouldn't really back anybody to beat Ireland in Dublin. And I do. It's funny the World Cup thing because you could say South Africa have won back-to-back World Cups. And by the, if any South Africans hear it and think that this is me trying to hate on you, like watch all the content on my channel. I love South African rugby. I love your players. I love everything about South African rugby. But you could say South Africa have won the last two World Cups, so they're clearly the best team in the world, and you could say that that's proof that they've sustained a level of performance. But theoretically, you could win a World Cup, then completely tank,
Yep.
and then win another World Cup, and literally be only good for those 4 months out of 4 years, but still hold that claim. Whereas a team that would like 5 out of 6 times win
Mm-hmm.
that game between those two sides. I'm not saying that's what it is, that's just an example.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't win a World Cup, because they lose one of the highest level test matches I've ever seen in my life against the All Blacks,
Yeah.
that proves that they're therefore not. And I don't think one game is enough to prove anybody is the best in the world. It has to be sustained. So I kind of think like on balance, outside of a World Cup, would Ireland beat South Africa more than half the time? I think so, is my personal opinion. But trust me, you're never going to convince the South Africans.
No, no. Well, I know that well. But I think like, the argument about it, people that the way you've made your case, I don't think anybody would disagree with that from the start to the end, right? But like when people say the best team in the world, people mean all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
And people are obviously also clouded by their biases, and there is also a question about like, well, what's more important? Like, is it more important to be a team that consistently wins longer format competitions, or is it more important to be able to win when the chips are down? And I would imagine most people's opinion is based on what their team is good at.
Yes.
So yeah, I think it's one of those endless debates that you're always going to get, but I think it won't. Ireland won't ever be able to convince the rugby public at large until they win. If Ireland win a World Cup and they're world number one after that, no one's gonna the stick to beat them with is gone. The quarterfinal thing is gone, right? Like once they do it, there'll be nothing left. They'll be undeniable if they manage to get to world number one after doing that. Some one day, I hope
Yeah.
it's in my lifetime. But right now, there's just this stick to beat them with, and it doesn't matter what the team does on a consistent level because people will always be able to say, "Yeah, but you never gone past the quarterfinal," and that'll
Yeah.
always be there.
So then let's look ahead to the rugby that's to come up. So I've just realized that the rugby actually starts on a Friday night, which is very
Yes,
weird for Test rugby. So let's just do some quick fire predictions for next weekend then. So first game,
let's do it.
Ireland versus the All Blacks in Dublin, 8:10 on a Friday night, the classic kickoff time. How do you see this one going? Who do you see being victorious?
I think Ireland will win it. I think New Zealand have a couple of injuries. Um, I think Bowden Barrett's out.
Yep, Bowden Barrett and Corey Taylor both out.
And Cody Taylor out. Yeah, exactly. So straight away.
Sorry, Corey Taylor is the lead singer of Slipknot. Cody Taylor is the okay.
I mean, we didn't actually talk about it when we talked about England and New Zealand, but their line out went to pieces in the
Oh,
second half.
so
And
bad. Yeah.
if they do that again against Ireland, I think they'll be in trouble. Yeah, I think Ireland should be able to win it. Like I
No
think
Dan
there's
Sheehan or Rowan Kelleher.
well, apparently Kelleher might be fit.
Oh,
That was in the news yesterday. Um, maybe they go in with Kelleher and Heffernan. I don't know. I don't know. But if it's a hooker crisis for both sides, that'll be interesting to watch anyway. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think I still like it's so tough. New Zealand could do it. They can always beat you. But if I had to put money on the result, I'd say I think Ireland will win.
Yeah, Peter O'Mahony back fit as well. That guy should come on the pitch to the Undertaker music at this point. Every time you think he's dead, he's back again. So I agree. Ireland versus New Zealand. I think New Zealand, nothing will have quite prepared them. Nothing that no game they've played under Razor so far will have prepared them for what Ireland are going to bring.
Mm,
And I think that when we talk about the cohesion, like normally you would say that the Northern Hemisphere team is coming in cold, but because
yeah,
it's Leinster and friends with
yeah,
Ireland and it's such a settled team,
yeah.
I think that that doesn't come into play. And Ireland's like haven't lost a November fixture for like since like 2016, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah,
Mad. So I don't see that changing. England against Australia. England,
yeah. I think England.
yeah, I don't think Australia are going to be able to get up to that level. I think they've still got some serious problems. Italy,
Yeah,
Argentina. Now, this is one of those funny fixtures where some years you're like, oh, this is interesting because it's the
yeah.
worst team in the Six Nations against the worst team in the Rugby Championship. But that's not the case anymore. Italy are good, but Benetton have been really disappointing in the URC so far this season.
Yeah,
Really underperforming, in my opinion. And Argentina are arguably the third best team in the world.
arguably, yeah.
So are we saying Argentina win?
I think so. I think so. Like, but which Argentina are we going to get?
Yeah, never get two
Because
good performances in a row with Argentina.
no, like, I mean, New Zealand obviously put that massive score on them the game after Argentina pulled off their result, but I think that the Wallabies one is the one that points to the really concerning stuff because New Zealand can blow teams away. That happens. But like how they didn't win that, how they didn't win two games against the Wallabies,
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
Um, so it depends which one we get. But what I love about this fixture is the two coaches. I love Casada, love Contepomi. I just hope we see both teams able to show at least what's good about them during the game. Um, I reckon Argentina will win it though.
yeah. I agree. I agree. France, Japan, France easily. Japan aren't gonna even throw a shot. The only chance that Japan have to be competitive, in my opinion, is France pick a silly team and the cohesion is just absolutely nowhere, and then it
Yes.
turns into a bit of a silly game.
Yeah.
But
I think it might get silly either way, but I think
yeah,
it might get silly high score for the French.
but I can't see Japan. Apparently, France are going to play Ramos at 10, is what I'm hearing.
Okay.
But I think DuPont is going to have a field day against Japan. I've got to be honest. I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see. Does France, do they just go straight back to being the DuPont inspired team they were before? Because I know they sort of ironed the kinks out while he was gone, but they are a different gravy when he's there. Like, I wonder, is there going to be a betting in period, or if, I mean,
Yeah,
it hasn't
I've
happened
wa-
for Toulouse.
I've
He's
watched a
just gone
bunch.
straight back in.
Yeah, I've watched a bunch of Toulouse, and when Dupont came back, the whole team changed. Everyone's body language changed. Everyone's confidence changed. It was like a light switch was flicked. So yeah, Wales against Fiji. I Fiji are gonna have their big stars back. They were disappointing in that first game against Scotland, but I think this isn't even banana skin. I think Fiji are favourites for this game based on form that we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think this one's going to be tight. I do. Because like for Wales to really raise their level of number one, a couple of bigger names are back in, like a couple of players they've been missing are back in.
Yeah,
Although I did see, I can't remember who I saw say it. Someone said that with that squad that he picked, you can see a really exciting team selection and the most conservative, like terrible, boring team selection as well. And I
yeah.
think a lot depends on where they fall on that scale.
If he persists with the Ben Thomas, Mason Grady, Owen Watkin midfield, Fiji are going to destroy that
Yeah.
because that's three players playing in not their best position at test
Mm.
level, and it's the Fijians will just absolutely pulverize that. Um, if they pick Thomas Williams and Gareth Anscombe at the halfback partnership, which I think he will,
Yeah, I think he will too.
then there's a chance. But it's the what for Wales to win this, we'd have to see them step up so hugely. The only thing is that some of the Welsh regional players, which is unusual, are coming in with a bit of confidence. So the Scarlets have
Mm.
won three in a row, and this is something that they didn't have. at any point last season, because the only Welsh team that was winning last season was the Ospreys, and Gatland didn't pick any of them.
Yeah.
So it was all players who were just losing week in, week out. And Benetton were winning a lot last season. So in the Six Nations, you had a Benetton call that was winning most
Yeah.
weeks against a Welsh call that couldn't win an egg and spoon race. So that's the kind of difference. But I think Fiji are favourites, and it's bad vibes with Wales. I mean, if anybody wants to hear my views on the women's situation, then I've done a separate podcast about that. You can find it in a community post on the YouTube channel. But yeah, bad
Yeah.
vibes. And
Very bad vibes.
by all accounts, there's not going to be many people in the stadium for it either.
Really?
Yeah, they've been struggling to shift tickets.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Well, that's there's no good news in there.
Yeah.
God,
And
yeah.
then Scotland, South Africa. I don't know. You go first on this one.
So we were talking about the big statement win. Glasgow did get one last season. In fact, they got a couple.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
the
they
biggest
very much
one
did.
was going and winning the final in South Africa against a very physical South African team, against the sort of team that used to pulverize Scottish teams out of it. If they're ever going to do it, now is the time, but I still think they won't.
Yeah, there is that. I'm sorry, Scottish listeners. There is that it's Scotlandness about it, and they do find a way to not rock up when it matters. Unfortunately, that's just historically what it's been. Like you said, Glasgow under Franco Smith have shown that they rock up when it matters. We yet
Yep.
to see it from Scotland. Now, it would be cool to see that Glasgow-ness seep into Scotland. And they're going to have Finn Russell back. They'll have Blair
Mm-hmm.
Kinghorn back, I hope. One of the star players in European rugby at the moment. But South Africa, I think, just know how to beat Scotland. I think they've got Scotland's number to an extent, and they'll just by hook or by crook. I think it might not be a pretty game, and I think it
Yeah.
might be an iffy performance from both teams, but I think South Africa might finish a score ahead. And it might be one of those games where Scotland are looking around going, how did we lose that after the game?
Yeah.
But I think they will lose that.
I can see that. And like South Africa are always, or always seem to be, even when they lose, like they're greater than the sum of their parts. And their parts are pretty good, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's not like they don't have good individuals, but they've got that thing where as a team, they can go places other teams can't. And I just don't think Scotland have that yet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So that wraps up, I think, all of the big games. That wraps up all of the talking points that I had down in my notebook. So it just remains for me to say thank you, Andy, aka Rugby Nause, for joining me today. It's been a fantastic chat. Where can people find you for anybody who, for some reason, doesn't know where to find you?
You can find me on TikTok at Rugby Nause or on Instagram at _Rugby Nause, where I couldn't get the handle. So
Ah, okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much again. Thank you to everybody for listening. Remember to like, subscribe, share, all the good things to really help me out. And we'll speak to you again next time. Cheers.